The bullet came first as a flicker of light, a spark in the fading dusk before the crack of the rifle split the silence. Clara didn't even realize she had been hit until the earth beneath her boots spun sideways and her knees buckled. Her breath caught, sharp and metallic, as pain flared hot across her side. She stumbled, clutching her waist, her fingers slick with blood before she even looked down. The prairie stretched around her, endless and indifferent, golden grasses rippling like the sea beneath the fire-colored horizon. The sun was sinking. Low, its glow painting the sky in streaks of red and violet, as if the heavens themselves were bleeding with her. Coyotes yipped far away, their voices carrying across the wide, open emptiness, eerie and mournful. Dust rose in her lungs, burning her throat with each ragged gasp, and she knew deep in her bones that death was near. Behind her, the thundering of hooves echoed like war drums. Whoever had fired that shot wasn't finished. The riders were coming. Clara's heart hammered, urging her to run, but her body betrayed her. She staggered forward a few steps, each one a battle, each breath searing like fire in her chest. The smell of iron filled her nose. She tasted blood on her tongue. Her father had always warned her, "Out here, the land doesn't forgive weakness. You stop moving, you die." Those words pushed her onward, but only for moments. Her legs gave way, and she crashed into the dirt. Dust filled her eyes, stung her throat. She coughed, groaned, tried to push herself up again, but her arms trembled, failing her. For the first time since leaving the safety of town, Clara felt utterly small, fragile, powerless against the vast, cruel stretch of the frontier. And then, through the haze of pain, she saw him. A figure emerged from the tall grass as if the prairie itself had given him shape. Broad shoulders, a body carved like stone from years of battle and survival. His skin glowed bronze in the dying light, long black hair streaming behind him like raven's wings caught in the wind. Across his bare chest gleamed pieces of turquoise, and bone, tribal jewelry that caught the last glimmer of the sun. He moved with the silent power of a predator, sure-footed, unhurried, but commanding the space around him like he belonged to it in a way she never could. Clara's breath hitched, not just from pain, but from fear. She knew what he was, a warrior, one from the very tribe her people had named their enemy. Stories had always painted them as ruthless, merciless, raiders of farms and killers of innocents. Yet here he stood, not with rifle raised, not with blade drawn, but with eyes locked on her. Dark eyes, sharp and unreadable, yet not cruel. Her instinct screamed at her to crawl away, to reach for the pistol tucked beneath her skirts, but her body refused. She could only watch as he closed the distance between them, the leather thongs around his arms swaying, the turquoise beads clinking faintly with each step. The world narrowed to the rhythm of his approach, to the sound of her own ragged breaths. When he reached her, the warrior knelt, his shadow falling across her trembling body. For a moment, the entire world seemed to pause the fading wind. Cries of coyotes, even the pounding hooves in the distance. He studied her wound with an intensity that made her shiver, his gaze sharp as flint. Clara braced herself for the cold of steel, the final strike that would finish what the bullet had begun. But instead, his hand pressed gently against her wound. Warmth, pressure, steady, controlled, almost careful. Clara gasped, her vision swimming, her body fighting against the weight of his touch. He spoke then low, steady words in a language she couldn't understand. The syllables rolled like a chant, soft and rhythmic, carrying neither malice nor victory. She tried to form words, tried to spit defiance at him the way her father would have. But her lips trembled, her voice broke into a whisper. All she could manage was a single desperate question. Why? Help me? The warrior's gaze lingered on her, unreadable as the stars beginning to appear overhead. He didn't answer. Instead, He lifted her into his arms with a strength that seemed effortless, her head falling against his chest, the thump of his heartbeat steady beneath her ear. His scent filled her nose-smoke, leather, sage. The last thing Clara saw before darkness took her was the sky above, streaked with firelight and shadow. Somewhere beyond, the riders still pursued. But in this man's arms, this enemy warrior, she felt, against all reason, the faintest spark of safety. And in that moment, as consciousness slipped away, she realized something terrifying. Her fate was no longer her own. When Clara woke, it was to the crackle of fire and the ache of her body, pain that throbbed with each breath she managed to drag into her chest. Her first thought was that she had died, that this place, this hush of wind through the cottonwoods, this glow of embers burning against a sea of night, was some waiting ground between heaven and hell. But then she shifted, and agony lanced through her side like a knife. Her hand flew instinctively to her wound, finding rough cloth pressed tight against her waist. Not her dress, not her doing. Someone had bound her up. The fire popped, scattering sparks, and her gaze snapped toward the source of the sound. He was there. The warrior, kneeling beside the flames, he ground herbs against stone with the calm precision of a man who had done this many times before. The light painted his bronze skin in shades of amber and shadow, the muscles of his back taut and defined, his long black hair spilling forward as he worked. Pieces of turquoise and bone glimmered faintly at his chest, catching the fire's glow. For one breathless moment, Clara thought she might still be in a dream. No enemy warrior should have been here, tending her wounds instead of ending her life. Yet every detail, the weight of the blanket over her, the smell of sage smoke mingling with the bitter tang of crushed leaves, the steady rhythm of his movements told her this was real. Her pulse quickened. Fear warred with confusion, and confusion gave way to something she dared not name. He glanced up then, eyes catching hers across the fire. Dark eyes, sharp, deliberate, carrying a silence heavier than words. Clara froze, her mouth suddenly dry. She wanted to ask him why he had saved her, why he had carried her away from death when he should have let her bleed into the dirt. But the weight of his gaze rooted her, and the question died on her lips. Instead, she whispered the only thing she could manage. "You?" His eyes narrowed slightly, though not in anger. He set down the stone, lifted a clay bowl, and came closer. Clara tried to push herself upright, but pain shot through her ribs and she hissed, collapsing back onto the blanket. His shadow fell over her as he crouched at her side. He spoke then, words in his own tongue, low and rhythmic. They rolled like water over stone, steady and calm, but foreign to her ears. Clara's heart pounded, half with fear, half with something else, the realization that she was utterly at his mercy. She clenched her jaw. "I don't understand you." He didn't reply, only dipped his fingers into the bowl. She flinched as he pressed the cool paste of crushed herbs against her wound. The sting sharp, almost unbearable. A whimper escaped before she could bite it back. His gaze flicked to hers, steady, unyielding, not mocking, not cruel, simply watching as though measuring her strength. Then he bound the wound tighter with a strip of hide, movements firm but careful, his touch never lingering more than it needed to. Clara's eyes burned. She hated the helplessness, hated the trembling of her own body. She was her father's daughter, taught to ride hard, to shoot straight, to stand tall in a land that tried to break the weak. And yet here she was, trembling beneath the hands of a man her people had sworn to despise. Why? She whispered finally, the words scraping out of her throat. "Why save me?" For a long moment, the only sounds were the crackle of the fire and the whisper of wind through the cottonwoods. His dark eyes stayed fixed on her, unreadable, carrying some weight she couldn't fathom. Then, slowly, he sat back on his heels. his gaze drifting to the stars overhead. As though the answer lived there, he said nothing, but silence itself became an answer. Clara's chest tightened. Perhaps he didn't know why either. Perhaps mercy was as dangerous to him as it was to her. The thought unsettled her more than any blade could have. The night pressed in around them. The fire burned lower. Clara lay awake long after, staring at the warrior's silhouette as he kept watch beyond the flames. Every now and then the wind shifted, carrying the distant echo of Hoof's pursuers still scouring the prairie. A shiver ran through her, not just from fear, but from a dawning realization she could not yet name. This man, this enemy warrior, was the only reason she was still breathing, and that truth was more terrifying than death itself. When Clara next opened her eyes, the world had changed. Gone was the wide, open prairie with its endless horizon and merciless winds. Instead, she found herself cradled in the embrace of a dense wilderness. Towering cottonwoods rose above her, their branches tangled like a cathedral of green, blotting out much of the night sky. The air here was heavy, damp, alive with sound folk of frogs from some hidden river, the steady hum of crickets, the rustle of unseen creatures moving in the underbrush. The scents were overwhelming: wet earth, crushed leaves, smoke, and the bitter tang of herbs. She stirred, her body aching, and realized she was still alive. The fire nearby burned low, its orange glow licking the shadows of the trees. Beside it, crouched like some spirit belonging to the forest, was the warrior. Worked with quiet intensity, his bronze form gleaming with sweat in the humid air. Muscles rippled along his arms as he ground roots between stone, mixing them with water in a clay bowl. His long black hair swung forward, glinting in the firelight, beads of turquoise and bone resting against his chest. The shadows clung to him, yet the fire painted him in color amber, copper, and gold. Like a living sculpture carved by the wilderness itself, Clara tried to shift, to sit upright, but a lance of pain tore through her ribs. She gasped, collapsing back onto the blanket of hides he had laid for her. The sound made him glance up. His dark eyes locked on hers across the fire, sharp and watchful. For a long, breathless moment, neither moved. Clara's heart hammered in her chest. The jungle seemed to fall silent, as if even the insects paused to watch them. She should have felt fear. This was a man of the enemy, a man her people had taught her to despise. Yet there was no cruelty in his gaze, only something weightier, something that made her throat tighten. She whispered, her voice hoarse. Where are we?" He did not answer. He only stirred the mixture in the bowl, then rose to his full height. The movement was fluid, graceful, yet heavy with power, like a predator slipping through the trees. He came to her side, crouched, and dipped his fingers into the cool paste. Clara tensed, bracing for the sting. The jungle around them seemed to lean in, listening. His touch was careful, deliberate, as he pressed the herbs into her wound. She hissed, squeezing her eyes shut, but when she opened them again, she found his gaze fixed on her face. There was no triumph there, no malice, only focus. His silence was heavier than words, yet it held a strange gentleness that left her. Unsettled, Clara clenched her jaw. "You could have left me. You should have left me." His hands paused for the briefest second, then continued their work. The fire crackled. Somewhere above, an owl gave a low, mournful call. She turned her head away, staring into the shadows. "If my people find me with you, they'll call me traitor. If yours find you with me," she swallowed hard, her throat thick, "they'll kill you." He bound the wound with a strip of hide, tightening it just enough to stop the bleeding. Then he sat back on his heels, his face unreadable in the firelight. Slowly, he spoke words in his own tongue, low and rhythmic. Though she couldn't understand, the cadence was almost soothing, like water flowing over stone. Clara's chest tightened. For all the hatred their worlds demanded, for all the blood that had been spilled between their people here in this hidden jungle. Those things seemed distant, almost unreal. There was only the fire, the damp night air, the steady hum of life all around, and the silent bond between a wounded woman and the warrior who had saved her. Her eyes burned. She hated the tears that welled there, hated how vulnerable she felt. But when she dared to look at him again, she found his gaze not hard but steady, as though he carried her pain with her. She whispered, half to herself, "Why do I feel safer here? With you than I did with my own?" He tilted his head, as if hearing something in her tone, even if the words meant nothing to him. The firelight caught the turquoise at his chest, making it gleam like a shard of sky in the darkness. The jungle pressed close, humming, breathing, alive with secrets. Clara closed her eyes, exhaustion tugging her under again. The last thing she felt was his presence beside her, not touching, not speaking, only there. Like the firelight itself, a fragile boundary between life and death, fear and hope got and for. The first time since the rifle's crack had torn her world apart, Clara let herself believe she might live to see another dawn. By the third night in the wilderness, Clara no longer knew how much time had passed since the bullet had struck her. Fever still licked at her skin in waves, but the herbs the warrior used kept pulling her back from the edge. Each time she opened her eyes, she found herself in the same place beneath the dark canopy of cottonwoods, firelight dancing across the shadows, and him, always him. The warrior was constant, steady, like the heartbeat of the jungle itself. He rose at dawn to search for roots and bark, leaving her with water from the river and meat roasted over the flames. When he returned, he spoke little, sometimes not at all, but his silence never felt empty. Every look, every gesture, carried weight. Clara had learned fragments of his name. Once, when she had asked, pressing her weak voice into the thick night air, he had touched his chest and said, firmly, Tayan. The sound was sharp, proud, resonant. T-A-I-N. The name sat in her chest like a secret, and yet each time she whispered it, she felt as though she were stepping onto dangerous ground. That night, the air was thick with damp heat. Frogs croaked near the river. The fire sputtered low, casting shadows that danced like spirits along the trunks of the trees. Clara lay half reclined on the blanket, watching Tayan sharpen his knife with a flint stone. His hands moved slow, deliberate, the muscles in his arms shifting with each stroke. The turquoise at his chest glimmered when he leaned closer to the firelight. She found herself staring. When he caught her, she flushed, quickly turning her gaze away. But she couldn't shake the truth pressing against her heart. This man was her enemy. Her people had lost land, homes, and kin to his tribe. Her father's words rang in her ears, never trust them. They are shadows with knives in their hands. And yet Tayan had done the unthinkable. He had spared her, tended her wounds, given her his strength when she had none. That kind of mercy could not be explained by hatred. Her voice trembled when she finally spoke. Why me? Tayan paused mid-motion, knife gleaming in his hand. His eyes lifted, dark and unblinking. He didn't answer. Clara clenched her fists, frustrated. You could have left me to die. No one would have blamed you. My people, they would have rejoiced. And yours, she faltered, her throat tight. Yours would call you weak for saving me. The jungle pressed close, humming with the night. Tayan set down the knife, rose, and crossed the fire. His presence loomed as he crouched beside her, close enough for her to feel the heat radiating from his body. He spoke, his voice low, his tongue heavy with words she couldn't understand. Still, there was no mistaking the tone, firm, resolute, threaded with something fierce. Clara's chest tightened. She wanted to believe she understood, even if the key words were foreign. That she wasn't just some wounded stranger he had burdened himself with, that there was something else in his choice. A silence settled, heavy as the humid night. Clara found herself trembling, though not from pain. Slowly she reached out. Her hand brushed his wrist, fingers resting against the pulse that beat strong beneath his skin. His eyes locked with hers. The world narrowed, the fire's crackle, the frog's song, the rustle of leaves all seemed to fade until there was only the space between them. His gaze was fierce, yet not unkind. For the first time, Clara saw not an enemy warrior, not a shadow born of her father's stories, but a man. Flesh, bone, scars, strength. A man who had chosen to save her, again and again, against every reason not to. The moment stretched, fragile, as spun glass. Then, suddenly, he pulled back. His jaw tightened, his eyes hardened. He rose, turning away, retreating into the shadows beyond the firelight. Clara's heart sank. She knew what it meant. This bond between them, it was dangerous, deadly. If her people found her with him, they would brand her a traitor. If his people found her here, they would call him dishonored, unworthy of his warrior's place. And yet, lying beneath the canopy of the jungle, Clara knew the truth pressing deeper each night. She was alive only because of him. And that fragile thread of survival was slowly weaving into something more, something forbidden. The peace of the jungle broke with the pounding of hooves. At first Clara thought it was thunder, rolling low across the night. But then the fire quivered, the ground beneath her trembled, and she knew. Riders, men with rifles, searching her. People hunters who would gladly finish what the bullet had started, even if it meant spilling more blood. Her heart stuttered. She struggled upright, pain tearing through her ribs, eyes wide with terror. "They've found me," she gasped. Clutching at the edge of the blanket, Taan was already moving. He rose from the shadows like a spirit conjured by the earth itself, tall and commanding, his long black hair flowing as he crossed the camp. The firelight gleamed across the turquoise and bone at his chest, the muscles of his back taut as he reached for his bow. His movements were swift, fluid, but never panicked. Clara realized with a jolt that he wasn't just tending her, he had been watching, listening, preparing for this moment. He crouched beside her, pressing a finger to his lips. The command was silent but firm. "Do not speak." The hooves grew louder. Nearer. The sound of men's voices carried through the night, harsh and brash, breaking the harmony of the wilderness. They called her name, curses riding on their breath, threats thrown into the jungle as if daring her to crawl from hiding. Clara's blood ran cold. She knew those voices. Men from town. Men who had once tipped their hats to her on the boardwalk, who now hunted her like an animal. Her throat tightened. "If they see you," she whispered, her voice trembling, "they'll kill you too." Taan didn't answer. His hand pressed against her side where the bandage lay, his palm warm and steady. His dark eyes burned into hers with a vow she didn't need words to understand. "I will not leave you." Branches snapped in the distance. The glow of lanterns flickered between the trees. The riders were dismounting, spreading out their boots, crushing leaves and undergrowth as they searched. Taan pulled Clara to her feet with surprising gentleness. She staggered, biting back a cry of pain, but his arm wrapped around her, steadying her against his chest. He guided her through the thicket, each step a careful dance between life and discovery. Leaves clawed at her dress, branches tore her arms, but his grip never faltered. The jungle became their shield. Shadows swallowed them, branches tangled above, and the sounds of pursuit grew closer, then farther, shifting as the men moved through the undergrowth. Clara pressed her face against Taan's shoulder, her breath shallow, her heart thundering so loud she was certain it would betray them. They came to a river bank where the moonlight gleamed silver against the water. The current hissed softly, carrying the scent of silt and reeds. Taan crouched low, scanning the darkness. His eyes caught every flicker of lantern light, every echo of boots stomping through the brush. He seemed carved from stone, his breath steady, his body poised between fight and flight. Clara's fear clawed at her chest. "Please," she whispered, desperate, "leave me. I'll only get you killed." At that, Ton turned his gaze on her, fierce and unyielding. His hand pressed firmly against her wound again, not just to hold her steady, but as if to anchor her to him. He shook his head once sharp final. The message was clear. He would not abandon her. Shouts rang out suddenly, men calling closer now. The river shimmered with their lantern light. Clara froze, her body trembling, every nerve on fire. Tayan bent low, his lips close to her ear, and spoke a single word in his tongue. She didn't know what it meant, but the tone was a promise, steady, grounding, unbreakable dot. Then he guided her into the reeds, crouching low, the river's silver sheen masking their forms. Lantern beams cut through the trees, men's voices rose, rifles clinked, but somehow, through the chaos that remained unseen, Clara clung to him, breath ragged. And in that moment she realized the truth that terrified her more than death. He wasn't just saving her life, he was choosing her. Again and again, against all odds, against every law of tribe and blood, this warrior was choosing her, and the price of that choice could very well be both their lives. The first light of dawn painted the jungle in gold and shadow. Birds began to stir high in the canopy, their cries sharp and strange, breaking the silence of the long night. The woman stirred too, her eyes flickering open against the aching. Her ribs. Every movement reminded her of the wound in her side, but it was dulled now, numbed by the warrior's herbs. She turned her head and saw him. He stood a few paces away, silhouetted against the jungle light, his powerful frame rigid with tension. His long black hair spilled like a river down his back, and the turquoise and bone jewelry across his chest caught the sun like bits of fire. In his hand he held a spear he had carved overnight. Every muscle in his body was alert, as if he'd spent the dark hours listening for footsteps in the underbrush. When he finally turned, his eyes found hers, and for a long moment neither spoke. "You should not have moved," he said at last, his voice low and stern. "Your wound is deep. You are alive because I chose it so. Do not waste it." Her lips parted, but no words came. She wanted to tell him she didn't trust him, couldn't trust him. He was of the tribe that had raided her people. But the truth pressed against her chest. Without him, she'd have bled into the dirt hours ago. "Why?" she whispered finally. "Why save me?" He crouched by the fire, feeding it with twigs, his jaw tight. The flames lit his bronze skin, the scars carved. Across his shoulders marks of a warrior who had faced death many times. "I saw too much blood," he said simply. "Yours was not meant to fall that night." She studied him, confused by the contradiction. Here was a man shaped by war, trained to be merciless. And yet he had shielded her, nursed her wound, risked himself against his own kind. The crack of a branch snapped both their heads toward the trees. The warrior's body tensed like a drawn bow. He motioned with his hand for her to stay silent and crept to the edge of the clearing, spear raised. She could see the controlled power in every step, the way he moved like part of the jungle itself, not an intruder in it. A shadow flickered in the trees. 2 riders. She saw the glint of rifles as they scouted the area, their horses snorting uneasily at the thick undergrowth. Her heart hammered in her chest. If they looked this way, if they saw the trail of blood, the fire's smoke, they would be finished. The warrior crouched low, watching, his chest rising and falling with the patience of a predator. For long minutes, the riders lingered, voices low in a tongue she recognized, the same men who had burned her settlement. Her fists clenched in the blanket as anger and terror churned in equal measure. Finally, the riders turned their horses and melted back into the forest. The warrior stayed motionless, waiting until even the echo of hooves faded. Only then did he lower his spear and return to her side. Her breath came in shaky bursts. "They were yours." His eyes narrowed, unreadable. "No," he said after a pause. "They are men who claim blood for blood. They are lost to rage. I am not them." Her chest tightened. She wanted to believe him, needed to believe him. But the world they came from had carved lines too deep, walls too high. Still, when he reached out and adjusted the bandage at her side, his touch was careful, almost reverent. "You must learn to walk again," he said. "We cannot stay. The jungle hides us, but it will not protect us forever." She forced herself upright, gasping at the pain, clutching his arm for balance. His muscles were solid, steady, like stone under her fingers. For the first time since the battle, she felt a flicker of something other than fear. It was dangerous. This strange tether forming between them. But as the jungle whispered around them and the sun climbed higher, she realized one truth she could no longer deny. Her survival was bound to his. And perhaps his to hers. The jungle fell into silence after the riders disappeared, but it was not the kind of silence that brought peace. It was heavy, expectant, the air charged with the memory of what had almost happened. Clara leaned against a tree, her face pale, her breath shallow, yet her eyes never left him. The warrior, her unlikely savior, her sworn enemy's kin, stood motionless at the edge of the clearing, spear in hand, muscles taut as if he were carved out of stone. The first rays of dawn brushed across his bronze skin, catching in the silver and turquoise of his tribal jewelry. Clara swallowed hard. "Why?" Her voice broke in the stillness, hoarse but clear. "Why are you risking your life for me? For someone who was meant to hate you?" The warrior turned, his black hair catching the light like flowing obsidian. He studied her for a long moment, his expression unreadable. Finally, he lowered the spear and walked toward her, each step deliberate, silent as if the earth itself welcomed his tread. "When I found you on that field," he said, his deep voice low but steady, "I saw not the enemy. I saw a woman abandoned to die, alone, bleeding. In our way, to leave one suffering when you have the power to help is dishonor, even if that one once raised steel against us." Clara blinked rapidly. His words cut through her chest sharper than any blade. She had been raised to see his people as savages, enemies, obstacles to be cleared away so settlers could lay claim to the land. Yet here he was treating her wounds, carrying her through darkness, shielding her from his own tribesmen who might not understand his choice. "You saved me from them," she whispered. "Your riders, they would have killed me." His jaw tightened. "They hunt because they know you do not belong. To them, you are a trespasser on sacred ground." "But," he hesitated, kneeling down so he was eye level with her. "But to me, you are more than that. You are a test the spirits have given me." Clara's throat tightened. She wanted to protest, to deny the strange pull that had grown between them since that first night by the fire. But when she met his eyes, dark as storm clouds, yet filled with something unyielding, she could not. Suddenly the cry of a hawk pierced the air. Both turned sharply. The warrior was on his feet in an instant, scanning the tree line, every muscle in his body ready for the worst. Clara's heart hammered. For a moment she feared the riders had returned, but no shadows appeared. The hawk's cry faded into the distance, leaving only the rustle of leaves in the morning breeze. Slowly he lowered the spear. "You must leave this place," he said firmly. "The jungle will not hide you forever. My people will not stop searching." Clara felt her chest tighten, not only with fear but with something deeper. "And you? What will you do?" The warrior looked away toward the horizon where the sky bled into gold. I have broken the path of my tribe. They will call me traitor if they learn. But a warrior's honor is not only in loyalty, it is in the choices he makes when no one is watching. Clara reached for his hand without thinking. His fingers, calloused and strong, closed gently around hers. She felt warmth pulse through her, steadying her racing heart. I don't even know your name, she whispered. He turned back to her, his expression softening, though his stance remained proud. I am Dakota. It means friend to all. Her lips trembled. Then, Dakota, you are the first friend I have truly had. The fire between them was not the crackling embers by their feet. It was something unspoken, something dangerous yet undeniable. Both of them knew the world would not understand. Settlers would condemn her. His tribe might banish him. Yet in this fragile clearing, surrounded by the wild heartbeat of the jungle, they had found something rare, an alliance born of compassion, trust, and sacrifice. Dakota released her hand gently, his gaze steady. You must live, Clara. Carry this with you, the memory of a warrior who chose not to kill, but to save. Her eyes stung with tears. She wanted to tell him she would never forget, that his face, his voice, his strength would remain with her for as long as she breathed. But her voice broke, and all she managed was a trembling nod as the sun climbed higher. Burning away the shadows, Dakota turned, spear in hand, and disappeared into the dense embrace of the jungle, leaving only footprints in the earth and the faint echo of his presence in her soul. Clara clutched her blanket to her chest, her wounds aching, but her spirit blazing with a new fire. She was no longer just a wounded woman left to die. She was a survivor, carrying the story of a warrior who defied his world to save her life. And as she stumbled forward into the unknown, she realized something with absolute certainty. Whatever the future held, she was no longer afraid.